cars. And we used to actually block out this dead end for like parties or whatever, and without even getting. I mean, no one cares. Yeah, so it's fun.
Will, thanks for doing this.
Of course, thank you.
Will, how do you say your last name?
Luera.
Luera. I didn't know if the L was silent or not.
Yeah, so no, full on L.
All
Luera.
Right, full on L. I feel like. One, super excited that like you're the first podcast guest I've had physically in the space because I did a online one.
Yeah.
And two, I'm excited that you're an improviser because like you're the first person I've had that I don't already know.
Oh, okay.
And it's so funny because I like, man, most times in life, if someone was like, "Hey, this person's been doing improv for a long time. Do you want to like sit with them in a car and chat?" I'd be like, "Yeah, yes, of course I do. Like, it'll be great." Or like, if like there's like a weird gig, like you know, in the improv community, like some business thing, and they're like, "Well, they're an improviser." I'm like, "Okay, cool."
Right.
It's like just such a different mindset.
Well, I am honored, and I'm sorry that my eyes keep wandering because I'm just taking in the van and like your hard work and craftsmanship.
I'll take it as a compliment. I was gonna run around. There's like these succulents on the wall, and like one of them died, and I just picked a little like green thing and put it in. And I was like trying to do some finishing touches. It's about 90% done.
Okay. Oh, this is fantastic. I love it.
Thanks, man. Yeah. It's been really fun. It's also like everyone's like, "Oh yeah," and it's like it's hard too, and it's like, yeah, it is. Like I just like you always just show people the good pictures and whatever on Instagram, and it's like, oh, it's kind of vacation-y, but it's not. But we're living in a vehicle, and like last night I was parked and my husband was playing, and I'm like, I have to shit. And I went to go start the car to go to a toilet.
Yeah.
And that's when the battery was dead.
Yeah. So stressful.
And then like I waved, the first person I waved down like gave me a jump, which was amazing. And then how shit sometimes come in waves.
Sure,
and leave an intensity. I was like, I thought I was in the clear. I was just gonna hold it out for my husband to be done playing, and then it like hit real hard. And I was leaving the car running, and like, truth be told, I was listening to some podcast that you were in, doing my research. I was like, I got him. Meet this guy online. And my husband called and was playing in the background, and he was like, I was like, Matt, I need you to. And he's like, what are those voices? And I'm like, Matthew! Matthew! I was like, listen to me. I need to come pick you up. So like,
I'm glad that I was
some
there.
Of those things.
I'm glad that I was there for that ride with you virtually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being there. I felt better because of it.
Talking about improv in your ear as you're going through this trauma.
Yeah, that's right. So you've been doing improv for like quite a while, right?
For a long time now. I mean, I guess the total number of years would be about 28 years.
Okay.
Like probably like right now, this month would be 28 years from when I first started. But if I count my professional years, it'd be more like 24 years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm so weird sometimes. When you said that, like 28 years doing improv, I just got little goosebumps. Like, hey, how's it going? You want to come in on the podcast?
Yeah, this is great, isn't it?
This must be your wife?
This is my wife, Maria.
I'm Jonny.
Hi, Jonny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you want to come in the podcast too and just hang out on the bed, like you're more than welcome.
It's okay.
Take a little snoozer.
You continue and check it out.
Oh, thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Well, yeah. So Maria and I, we met in Boston. Quick tangent. I know we might get to this later.
This is great.
Maria and I, we met in Boston, and we've been married now about 12 years now. 12 years, yes.
Very cool.
So, and Maria is also a theater artist.
Oh, and you guys still like each other?
Yeah. We do enough different stuff in theater.
That's good.
Right? That we could go in our own little pools, but every now and then we get in the same pool for a little bit.
What sort of theater stuff?
I do more social political theater, so like theater for the oppressed, playback theater.
And I'm going to tell everybody in case they didn't hear that because I don't think the mic would have picked it up. Social political theater, theater for the oppressed. That's very cool.
Yes, and improv is definitely a part of all of that. It's more like rehearsing for real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Enjoy your conversation.
Swing by again if you like. Nice to meet you.
Bye, Maria.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My husband obviously is an artist, playing cello,
Right.
but isn't in the improv world, and I like kind of love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's hilarious.
Yes.
Like so funny,
Oh,
which is
good.
a huge plus.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also like, you don't want to do improv, do you? You don't want to.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
my wife stayed away from improv. She would come to see the shows, and she didn't get it at first. And I this is something that
She didn't get it. I like that.
I have to admit, like, this is something that sparked my just curiosity in improv years ago. But there was just a cultural gap. Like, she's Brazilian, and so she really didn't get like a lot of the American sensibilities and sense of humor. So she would go to Herald Night at Improv Boston. She's like, I don't know what they're referring to. I don't know why everybody's laughing, right? And so, yeah. But she eventually started to, when we moved here to Sarasota, she's like, you know what? I have nothing else to do. I'm going to take your classes. She took all my classes. She eventually became part of our in-house musical improv troupe. She's a singer, so she does that. Yeah.
That's interesting that, it's like, well, you got to, I think, like two hurdles, right? When like someone is like already watching long form for the first time, like getting that.
Right.
And then to like layer on top of it, like a bunch of cultural humor, inside jokes.
Yeah.
I was talking to Stacy on an episode.
Stacy Smith?
Stacy Smith,
yes.
yeah. About like Boom Chicago and about like those references like they're making on stage and not making, and like she's like, I just say the names of the grocery stores there and they go wild.
Yes. Isn't it amazing? Like it's funny, like sometimes when we'll have guest performers here in our shows in Sarasota, I invite them to watch the main show, and then I'm like, you'll be on, and you'll come in and do the encore set with us, or we'll do a later set. They'll come in, watch the main show, and they'll get it eventually. They're like, oh, okay, all right. We talk about the snowbirds, we talk about the roundabouts, we talk about the age gap here in Sarasota, and you make references to some of the locations, and boom, you got them. You got the audience.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's one thing I kind of want to talk to you about too. Is you have done like a bunch of teaching, like abroad, right?
Yes.
And performing abroad too, or
a lot of performing abroad as well. Yes.
It's kind of interesting. I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on like, as you've traveled, like how you've had to like adjust, whether it's your teaching or like some observations you've had about like. I've had limited, like I've is primarily just been in Europe. I did like a few little workshops, and from country to country you even notice some things, but like it's very interesting.
Yeah, you have to, and that's something I learned early on about making those adjustments. So yeah, this is a great question. It's something I like to talk about, because my first international trip outside of North America, because before this trip, I'd been to Toronto to do shows. So, I'd stayed in the North American improv circuit. But then in like 2003, 2004, we were invited to do a show in Puerto Rico. And this was like our first, I know it's American. I get it's part of the United States, but it's culturally very different. So we were invited to go do that. And they were like, yeah, there's going to be troops in from Spain, from Mexico, from Puerto Rico, from Chile. And now you're going to represent Team USA. Now, this is a time when there wasn't that much international touring going on. Yeah. So I talk about with some of my friends about when I used to tour back then, like 2003 to 2007 or 8. Everywhere I went, I was Team USA. Yeah. Like I was like the only American they saw. Yeah, like I literally would buy a jersey, and they're like, "Hey, I'm Team USA." So we got there, and it was a competition. So we were in that festival. We were Team USA, and we had our first set, and it was us versus, I think, the home team. It was us versus Puerto Rico, and we do our set, and we all have years of doing improv in the States. We do our set, like crickets. Even worse, this tournament had this thing that where the audience was given like these little foam balls, and if they didn't like the scene, they would throw it at you, and all it takes is one to then get the entire.
And they're flying the whole time.
They're flying the whole, and there's nothing more discouraging than just sitting on like doing a scene and watching these foam balls flying at your face. So like we're doing that, and we're like, oh, this is horrible. Then we all like go humbly sit down. Thinking like, oh, we came in, whatever, arrogant, cocky as the American improvisers. we're told to sit down. Then we see Puerto Rico go up, nailing it. I mean, they're just bam, bam, bam. But we notice, and this was going back to your question, and this is where I realized, you know what? Well, you can't just come in and do your same old American thing here.
Yeah.
And we all were looking at the Puerto Rican team, and they're like very physical, like very expressive, huge gestures. Mm-hmm. And so then that night, back at the hotel, we're like, we got to change our game. We got to do. That's what we got to do. And so that was just my first example. And every country I've been to ever since, there's always a shift that you have to do. But that was the first time I realized that.
I was, I think, and I don't know if I have a full enough grasp on it, because of, maybe it was like 4 or 5 workshops I've done in Europe. But I was starting to feel like I was picking up on that their improv was mirroring theater more than it was mirroring sketch comedy.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay.
That's a really important distinction. And I that same you're reminding me of like that same festival in Puerto Rico. And again, me being American improviser, mm-hmm. we go in, we're having like a post-show party or whatever, and I'm just talking to some improvisers from Mexico, and I'm just like, so what are you guys? Are you like IO, Second City, UCB, Annoyance? Like I'm just tossing out all these things. They're looking at me, not knowing.
What year is this again?
This is like 2003, 2004.
Okay.
And these people, the team from Mexico, some of the best improvisers that I know, just had an amazing show. And so I'm like, surely this must be grounded in some sort of school of thought that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
Right? They were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's when I learned, like, oh yeah, like there's more than just these 4 schools of thought. And that's what I learned. What they're doing is they're trying to replicate theater on stage through improvisation. Yeah. So they study playwrights, they dramaturge the hell out of it, and then try to recreate it through improv.
It's wild. It's very interesting because I feel like, everyone's got the different trajectories. They're like their bases, they're like studying improv.
Yeah.
And I feel like something kind of particular for me was that the first 4-ish years I did it in Michigan, I did it out of a local theater, and we did short form. I kid you not, for 4 years, never once was there a note or instruction.
Oh, wow.
Never. And so it was 4 years of like me trying to kind of work out best practices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we knew yes and.
Yeah.
And also getting just really comfortable failing.
So I'm glad you said that, because I was wondering, I'm like, was that good or bad that you didn't get any notes?
Well, by the time I moved to Chicago and I like was taking classes, I was like, holy shit, like there's a theory behind this. And I had just come out of finishing a double major in German and in philosophy, so I was like already in academic mode.
Sure, yeah.
Which is long behind me now, but I was just like so eager, and just like every little morsel of information, just like writing it down and poring over it every night, because I was like, I can't believe like I can go up there and have something in my pocket as far as best practices.
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's that sense of freedom that you're describing is something that like again with the no notes and just discovering how did you put it, being comfortable failing.
Yeah.
Oh, like that, honestly. I mean, I know we have our best practices and we have, I have my lesson plans, I have all of that, but it wasn't until recently, and I'm going to say like in the last, I have a curriculum that I've developed over the first version of it was 20 years ago. So I keep working on it. Literally every class I teach, I'm modifying something.
That's awesome.
But it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I was like, Will, you have to talk about failing. Like nowhere in this curriculum does it say it is okay to fail, and we want you to be comfortable with that. We want you to be able to be like, oh, okay, let me just dust that myself off. Let me get right back at it. All right.
Do you? I've thought about this. I feel it's a weird line to walk as a teacher. Of like having the pressure of like making a class feel fun for people.
Mm-hmm.
And like also like teaching them things where like, yeah, they have to like push into failure and like not have maybe a great class.
Yeah.
And you're like, isn't this great?
Yeah.
Are you glad you came?
Yeah.
And like leaning into exercises that you're just like, these aren't inherently fun.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting as a teacher because like every class is different too. Like some groups want to be pushed more and some don't.
Yeah.
And so it's such a tight walk for me, at least, of like making people feel like they're having fun, and then sometimes being like, oh damn, I just ran a whole class and like I don't think anybody had fun.
Yeah.
Because I was like they weren't ready for this.
Yeah.
This was maybe, and I was just like, they just needed something light.
Yeah.
They just needed a light, playful day.
And
I was like trying to, this is this concept.
Oh man, you're like hitting a nerve for me, because it's like that is one of the more stressful parts about creating a curriculum. And another one of the things that I've changed even more recently than that one change was, I'm like, Will, this is great. Like, your curriculum's awesome. You're really hitting a lot of good points, but you got to give them that carrot at the end of class. You got to, even if it means ending the class on a silly short form game that maybe it touches on part of the skills that you worked on, but more than anything, you're just having fun, right? And so I've started to redo my curriculum to like, even maybe it's just like, hey guys, we're gonna do scenes for 10 minutes, and I'm just gonna give you side coaching as we go. But even if that is after 90 minutes of like, okay, we're gonna drill, we're gonna drill this physicality, and we're gonna drill these vocal exercises, and they're coming out of it like, oh man, I suck, feeling like that, like, oh, this is really tough for me. But then you give them that little carrot at the end, be like, you know what, that's great. Let's just have a scrimmage. Basically, it's like a sports thing. It's like, let's just scrimmage for a little bit and have fun.
Yeah, it's it's also interesting too, because it's like if you've already like built a rapport with these people, you can have a class where you're like, oh, that was less giggly today,
right? Yeah.
But if it's like a workshop or something like that, it's a one-off. It's like, it's almost, you're thinking of it more like, I don't know, like a show, but like there's that level of like, if you don't make it fun early on, then they're not going to have fun when you try to make it fun later, right? Yeah. And so it's like finding that arc of like, let's get loose, let's get playful. I want to like try to hit some concepts. Yeah. That thing of failing is very interesting. I once had a teacher in the conservatory program. I always think about this. Said to me once, Jonny, just be okay in this scene with like it not going well or being funny, or just not even going that well. Like, I think early on I had a pretty like decent proficiency at knowing like how to find the funny in a scene, and like how to like make it a semi-successful scene. And that was an interesting thing of like, oh yeah, you're in class, just try this one. Don't worry about it like working out, and maybe don't even you got like a good sense of where the funny is, but don't go for it. And like, it was so overt, of like, just fail on this one. Yeah, it wasn't as specific as fail, but just don't worry about like making it funny or anything.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's okay. I don't let myself do that very often as a performer, especially in a show. You wouldn't.
That's such an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
And was that helpful for you in that moment?
I don't know. I don't know, but it always stands out to me. And it was just kind of like, I think it also kind of set the tone for me too, going forward in classes of like, hey, this is not a place where you have to like, you can try different things and they can fail, because that's exactly what you want to be able to do in a class, is like stretch yourself and like, this is the best place to do it. And I say something similar to people too, of like the focus on this certain exercise is like, don't worry about being funny. It's such a distraction.
Yeah.
As we all know.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because it's such an important thing. You're making me reflect again on when I added this part to the curriculum about failure and kind of talking about it. And part of my curriculums, I put in discussion points, and I instruct either the instructor or, in this case, myself. I'm like, at this point, have a discussion about this, right? Like, have a conversation, sit down, or in Zoom, like everybody just, we're just going to talk for a little bit, right? And we do, the reason why I ended up putting in failure is not because I think it's an important concept, but I would have students consistently during the check-in of the next week, they'd be like, oh yeah, I couldn't sleep after class last week because I kept thinking about what I should have done. And I was like, oh my classes are affecting people's sleep. Right? They're having fun, but it's like they're sitting.
It's powerful, Will. It's powerful.
I'm imagining them just sitting there in bed like their spouse or their partner is like, stop thinking about it. So I'm like, I gotta find a way to release that stress. And so just now it's like in think it's like week 3 or 4. So early in my curriculum, I'm just like, hey, everyone, we're about to start to get deeper into this stuff. And guess what? Some of the things are not going to go well. You might even say things that you're going to be like, that sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I want you to learn how to just release it. It's okay. Let it go. You're going to have another scene. And I tell people, and it sounds maybe hyperbolic, but I would say it's pretty honest. In my 28 years of improvising, I've never done the same exact scene twice. I might have done scenes that are similar, right? And I'm talking like pure improvise, not like planned premises, but like I might have done scenes that are similar, but never the same exact scene.
Yeah.
And I tell my students that I'm like, that scene that sucked, don't worry about it. Guess what?
It's gone.
It's gone. It's never going to happen again.
So I have a kind of a two-parter question for you. One, what is it that you kind of gravitate towards? Like, what gets you the most excited as a teacher when you're teaching? Like, whether it's a concept or like a sort of class or blah blah blah. And then 2, what as a performer, and are those the same?
Yeah.
Because I've been reflecting on this personally lately, and I'm like, oh, the thing I like to do as a performer the most, I actually don't teach the most.
Yeah. So I feel like, okay, this is another great question. Thank you, Jonny. And so I think the thing that brings me most joy as a teacher is teaching people how to articulate their sense of humor to start a scene. And like in a lot of my early classes, we really just focus on like, what is it that I truly believe this. So everyone is funny so I could say that, okay, I think everyone is funny. Now, could everyone actually be funny? That's a different story. Like, could you actually deliver a punchline, a joke, a funny character? That's something different.
The stage presence aspect of it.
All of that.
Yeah, being cognizant of how you're coming off.
So many different things.
Sure.
But I'm like, but everyone has some sort of sense of humor. There's something that you find funny.
Yes.
Right? And
that's for sure.
Yes. And so like, and I'm like, let's, and then that's my goal is like, the second part might be a more exclusive portion of the class, but the first, like, you know, the ones that are going to truly be comedians, but the first part, I'm like, we all find something funny. So let's sit in that for a little bit. Right. And so as a teacher of people, of humans, that brings me a lot of joy, is to have people sort of discover like, oh, this is what I find humorous, and now I'm going to share it with the rest of my class, and I'm going to gain confidence in that. And so like, and I'm like, oh, and I feel like that little process, then that person starts to gain confidence, maybe a little bit of courage. They start listening a little bit better, and they're able to engage in conversation a bit easier. So that's kind of the human part of me.
Is that an overall like note you just give someone before they're starting a scene, or like, is there like, if you're willing to share like a certain exercise that you have that you're like, this one is focused on like, go ahead and think about your favorite comedy film, and then I'll incorporate that sensibility into this.
That's a great question. So the very first, like week 1, level 1, week 1, I have an exercise. All it's called is what's interesting about, and that's all it's called. And in it, I basically tell the instructor, what you're going to do is you're going to introduce a topic, and then you're going to tell the class, to everyone, to share something that's either weird, strange, interesting, funny about the topic. And so last night I had a level 1 week 1 class, virtual class, and I think and it was 16 students, so 17 of us total. And I was like, okay, shopping mall. Shopping mall is a topic. Now we're all going to go and just share one quick statement. And again, this class, maybe some of 16 students, some less than a year of improv experience total of these 16 students. And so I'm just going, let's all go through it. And people were like, how there's a Sbarro's at every food court, how the perfume, how they try to get the perfume on you, right? How the people who do the waxing or whatever that is, the threading, like all of that. And people were just coming up with like all of these amazing little bits of, the speed walkers at the mall. Yes. Right?
I worked in a mall for years. They're all just resonating with me.
So like they brought all these up, and I told them, I'm like, and some of them obviously brought bigger chuckles out than others.
Yeah.
But then I told them, I'm like, we just had 16 great little nuggets that we could build scenes from, and all of them were interesting, all of them were funny, and all of them were yours, right? And so that and that's where I start, and then as we go every week, we start to kind of dig that out a little bit more, because then then I start to go into, all right, that idea you had about threading. With my little hand gesture here, threading.
And for those who are just listening, we're crossing our fingers and we're bouncing them on each other.
Yes. And so
for threading, that's international sign.
And so I'm like, and at about like week 3, 4, 5, I'm like, okay, now remember that idea about threading? Let's turn that into a scene. How would you start a scene about the weird thing about threading?
Yeah.
Right? And then now they start to figure out how to articulate their comedic sensibility. Exactly.
That's great.
So that is like, as a teacher of humans, that's what that's what I like. As a teacher of improvisers, right?
I was wondering what the alternative was going to be. I was like, the teacher of dogs.
Yeah, it's like once I dismiss like all the non-comedians, I'm like, thank you for coming. All right, comedians, you stay back, right? And for me, it's like I love teaching the tilt in scenes. So sort of like, hey, here's the everyday premise of the scene. Last 5-10 seconds. I love like just working on the tilts. Like, what is the weird bit of information that comes in? What is the weird secret that a character has that is organic? I don't want it to be like completely out of the blue, but I want it to be like really an organic process of these two characters, right? What secret is revealed, etc.
Can I ask you to expound a little bit on like what sort of things you would potentially see encompassed in the tilt of the scene?
What sort of? Sure.
Yeah, like what sort of, like, if it's like, you said the secret, like someone has a secret that's weird, or is it like how many like different things would you like, or what are some of the things that you would see as being part of the tilt?
Good. So I teach it. So I will say that I teach the tilt in 2 different ways. The first one is more of an organic one, right? So it's like we're going to do a kind of using the story spine as a start, right? Once upon a time and every day. So I'm like, just show me an everyday scene between these 2 characters. Okay, and so maybe we have 2 friends, we have 2 partners, 2 co-workers, whatever. And then they're just sort of engaging in their everyday conversation. But then one of them just maybe makes a weird gesture, looks at it weird, and then suddenly, and all I ask him to do, I'm like, that thing, whatever that thing was, unpack that. Like, you saw it, I saw it, we all saw it. Yeah, unpack that thing.
It has some maybe overlap with like game.
It has a little bit of yes,
but it might be more than just pattern play. It might be unpack that as well.
Right. Yeah.
Dig into why.
And then for me, the idea of a pattern then takes a more complex. It becomes more complex, because for me, the pattern is not something that we're unpacking it. But we're not going to start to create the pattern. We're almost going to acknowledge that this pattern existed before the scene started. Yeah. It was already there, and we're just unpacking it right now. Yeah. And then we're we're going to be like, okay, this thing that's happening right now is something that existed before the scene, right. And now and it's just tilting now.
It's true to the whole world.
Yeah,
and yeah,
exactly. And we're going to get into this.
That's fun.
And so we do a lot. Like, I love tilt scenes. My favorite, and I talked about it being an organic tilt. My other favorite thing is more of I'll sometimes refer to it as an artificial or a forced tilt. And it might be a little bit more like this. If you and I may engage in a just quick scene, and then I'll give you an example of what this. And so I would tell my students, look, this is an everyday scene, no conflict, no crisis, no surprises, no secrets. We're just two people hanging out, and we might say, where do we want to put ourselves? Maybe at a museum. Okay, we're at a museum, so we'll start that. 2 friends, or just 2 people at a museum. No conflict, no crisis, no surprises. All right, so here we go.
Gary, I feel more elevated when I'm here, like more sophisticated. I know I'm not, but I feel more sophisticated.
I know. It's like I'm like standing up straighter. Like
I noticed that since we walked in the door.
I know. It's like I'm just.
You look stiff.
I know. I feel like I have to. All right. It's like, but the art is so beautiful. Like I'm feeling more intelligent.
There's 2 things going on. It's beautiful. I feel better, but I also feel more judged.
What? You feel more judged?
Yes, other people are probably more into art than both of us combined.
Oh, don't feel so judged. We earn.
I only know the name Monet.
Good, and freeze. Good. So that one little, the forced tilt was me. You heard me say, what? Right?
Yeah. You made something more important.
Yeah. And I love that because I'm like, and I'll sometimes tell my students, I'm like, choose the most insignificant thing in the scene. Just choose the most insignificant thing and then force the tilt. And so sometimes it'll be something like, one of my favorite ones ever that one of my students did, and I'll never forget, I was teaching a class in Atlanta, and then it was two teachers in a teacher's lounge, and then one student goes to the other, they're like, okay, they were looking for something to write with. And then one teacher was like, yeah, do you want a black pen or a blue? That was how they said, do you want a black pen or a blue? And then this other student was like, what? Wait, you carry a blue pen? Right, and then so it forced.
It's such a good trick. Just the impassioned what?
Yeah, it is, and it's like, and then suddenly it just became this ridiculous thing of like, because not even the student didn't even know why they were saying it, so they have to unpack it for themselves. But we suddenly discover why this blue, and like I think it was something like, my husband signed our divorce papers with a blue pen, right, or something like that. Yeah. And now we know why they like. This,
that's so good.
But yeah, so the forced tilt, and I don't teach forced tilt like to my beginner students. That's something I kind of bring in later, because once you're more aware, you know, as more like experienced improvisers, you're a bit more aware of the entire landscape of the scene. Yes, we are in the moment and we're present, but we're also aware of everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, now that you're aware of everything, go ahead and force the tilt and see what the hell happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. It's such an easy, clear thing to explain. It's just put it in passion to what.
Yeah, put it in passion to what. Yeah.
I borrowed a exercise from Stacy Smith, and she may have developed it. I'm not sure if it was someone else. And sorry, Stacy, I'm giving it away to everyone. All 100 people who are listening. She has this exercise called "How Dare You," and it's kind of the similar thing. You're just making something very important, and like person A has to say a line that couldn't mean anything, right? And then person B immediately responds, like if it's like like it can't be a question, obviously, just a mundane statement of like, "There's some chips on the counter." And then you just launch with, "How dare you?" And you just go into a monologue.
I love that.
Just escalate until you cap it. And it's got that same sort of feature of the forced tilt. Of just like, things are bypassing us. Let's just make something important.
Yeah. I love that. I could almost, it's so funny you say that, and I could almost hear Stacy saying that. I could almost, but that, and I sometimes when my students are asking me, like, how do I make a scene funny? And one of the tips we talk about is like, take the most insignificant thing in the scene and make it the most important thing. Because usually what we're trying to do, I think sometimes, especially beginner improvisers, they're trying to introduce something that is of super important.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And then they try to make that funny. I'm like, no, look, make the most mundane thing.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny because that's something I know, but something I've never like said in a class, and that's so true and so good because there's so much of like. Yeah, that's like people are trying to make the most important choices, and it's like it's just a simple,
but it's important for them. It's definitely it's got to be really important for the characters, right? But we're trying to fit it into the paradigm of us as us, the actor. We're like, what would be important for me, the actor, right? Yeah. Oh, losing my house, my kids running away. Like, oh yeah, of course that's important, right? But for the character, right? Like, find like whatever the most mundane thing for them, and elevate it to just extreme important.
So as a performer, do you feel like is there like something that you either what do you lean into, or is there something that like you like this is actually something I like and I do that I actually really don't teach to very often. Do you have so both of those questions?
Okay, good. All right, yeah. So
what do you like to do as a performer?
So as a performer, there's I love the free, formless aspect of improv, and there's I have a group that I perform with called Big Bang.
I got to watch one of your shows last night.
And the whole goal is like we're coming in without form, and all we're doing is just sort of picking up on weird, funny intricacies that are happening within the scene. Like somebody said something weird, somebody did something weird, somebody referred to something strange, and then we're just part of and if you watch us before, part of it is like unpacking those tiny little moments, but also giving each other crap while we're doing it. Like it's almost like, why would you say something like that? Just because you said it, we're now going to go to that scene, right? And so that a lot of what's happening in Big Bang is that sort of playfulness, and it happens so quickly, right? The scenes are just coming in one on top of another because we're that's our sense of the sense of play. The things that I don't get to said I go. Hey,
someone just walked by. They used the porta potty. We didn't make eye contact with them. They didn't make eye contact with us. And also, if you're listening to Lawnmowers, that's just gonna be part of the show, you guys.
It's like an ASMR show.
Yeah.
Lawnmowers. No, it's so funny that porta potty was put there like a month ago, and I'm not even sure why, because there's nothing happening in this area. I mean, yes, we're hearing Lawnmowers, but they're not here every day. They're here once a week.
It's not a good spot.
Somebody was like, "Hey, let's just put this here next to Will's house."
Too many shits over there.
Actually, that might be why. Yeah. I'm not even. Now that you say it,
moment.
That might be why. Thank you, City of Sarasota.
Yeah. Might as well give them a place to do it. Yeah. I think we've mentioned this early on in this, but we're in a van with our doors open. So if you're just listening, that's what's going on.
Something that I like that I don't teach that much. Actually, it was one of the last classes I was teaching. It was cut off by the pandemic, actually, and that was the idea of a serial show. So where you build out a world and then you play in that world. And so the first time I ever did it was a medieval fantasy. So think Hobbit, stuff like that, Lord of the Rings. And so you work with your cast to build out what this world's going to look like. When I say build out the world, I'm talking about like not just your characters.
You have a conversation about what sort of elements.
Yeah, and it's like, what is this? How big is this world? What is it? Are we looking at a continent? Are we looking at like a city? Like what is it? And so we start the conversations begin there.
Do you draw a map?
We do draw maps. Yes. Oh, actually, I draw like a silly map, but then I almost every time I do this, I have a cast member who's just a real artist, and they'll detail it, and it's beautiful. So the one that I was doing right before the pandemic was not medieval fantasy, but it was film noir, and I gave them a bunch of different genres. I'm like, what are we gonna do here? Are we gonna do medieval fantasy? Are we gonna do film noir? Are we gonna do mobster? Are we gonna do horror or whatever? And so we all, for like the first two rehearsals, we build out the world. They're like, what does it look like? And then once we build that out, then they get to create their characters. And then we start to what I love about it, it feels like, I don't play too many video games, but it feels like those video games where you just get to go anywhere you want.
Oh, yeah. Like almost like a Zelda. Kind of open world.
Open world. There it is.
I think that's it. I'm not a huge gamer, too.
That feels right. I feel like I've heard that before.
Open world.
Open world improv. Opening in 2022, Jonny and Will's Open World Improv Theater.
When you said map, I read the Chronicles of Narnia like over and over growing up. I still like read the first one every winter. But there's like one of those maps in the front, just like Tolkien has those maps, you know. I like 10 years ago, I saw them online like at eBay for like before the movies came out, for like $20. So I probably shouldn't buy one. Now they're probably like $5 million. I just love those little. Oh no, my clock. I just love those little like maps that go with stories. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, any book that has pictures in it, I'm like happier for it.
Yeah. Do you like the picture breaks in books? Like when you're like reading and then suddenly there's like 12 pages of pictures.
I don't ever get a book like that.
Every now and then I'm like, it's especially like in a history, sort of like biography or something like that. It's like you're reading, and then suddenly boom, 12 pages of pictures.
That sounds great.
And then they're gone, and it's almost like, oh, I still have 180 pages to read.
Yeah, I honestly feel like even to this day, like because I go back and read, like I think, man, those books are the only ones that have pictures in them for the most part that I read. But every time I'm like getting to a new illustration, which is like every 5 pages or so in those, is it Pauline Baines is the illustrator? I don't know. There's someone else illustrated them later, and it was awful. But like every time I get to a picture, I'm like, yes, yes. Like I'm like, sometimes you feel good about ending a chapter, and you're like, I feel really good about getting to pictures. I wish there was more pictures in books.
I feel like there's got to be a word for that. Like maybe like there's a German word or something for like the feeling of anticipation for a picture in a book.
Yeah, it's and it's like quite an honest thing, not even hardly even a joke. It's just like I look, and I don't read graphic novels or anything like that, so that's surprising. But yeah. Anyways, I got excited about
the map about maps. I'm a big fan of maps.
Are you?
Oh yeah, I love maps.
Do you plan a road trip on a paper map?
Ooh, good. I used to.
It's a lot more work.
Yes.
It's like you'd have to really want it.
Yeah, I mean, I will. Okay, by plan, like I don't take the map with me, but when I am planning a road trip, I do bring out a map.
Yeah.
And then I ended up transferring that over to a more. I mean, now with GPSs, it's like that. I just outline it, but I will look at a map when I'm starting a trip, just to kind of get the lay of the land.
Okay, this is something I've been doing for myself.
Okay.
This is really important. Is on Google Maps, you can like have it like ebb and flow. It doesn't stay true north all the time. It like follows you. Mm-hmm. I've been like plotting north when I'm like, especially in a new place where I'm traveling a large distance and like zooming out a lot more. And it gives me such a happier sense in my brain of where I physically am in a city or the country as a whole. When I just follow that little wiggly thing, I have no sense of where I am.
Now, is that like where the body of water is? You know where like the hills are or something like that? Is that...
You get to feel like if you're on like there's like a lot of diagonal streets in the area. But honestly, even just geographically, like getting a sense of like I don't know the geography of where all the states are that well in the U.S. It's like I know better the countries in Europe where they fall than I know like what's the next state over. It's like it's more vague in my head.
Yeah.
And so like whenever I'm on a road trip, I feel like I'll arrive somewhere and I'll feel like I wish I would have looked at a map before and just had a better sense of how much space I traveled.
Yeah. I love maps. I love traveling. I'm pretty good with the United States. Like I could almost pinpoint every single state on a map.
Are you also the sort of person who's like, you know what highway you're on? Like if you took the highway, someone's like, "What highway you're on?" You're like, "Oh yeah, that was." Internet. You know, I'll take highways places like, and I won't even know what highway I was on. And I feel like that's just like I'll like, get there and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, did you take highway?" I'm like, "I don't know." I put that in my short-term memory.
How's your sense of direction?
Better than maybe the average person by a little bit.
Okay.
That's my knee-jerk guess.
Okay.
Just knowing, but that's knowing people who are awful and being alarmed.
Yeah, isn't it strange?
It's alarming.
Yeah.
I had a friend that was like, I can relate in that like I'm an awful speller. I can't spell. But like sometimes when you can do something, you just can't imagine why someone else can't. And I had a best friend, still a good friend of mine, he lives out of state, who like you could just describe the most simple, like you're just gonna take a left at the next street, and he's like, write it down, Barry, write it down, and like, and I got to know him, like, and I was like, oh, this isn't a joke, and like after a couple of years, like I saw him like be like, how do I get? And this was like we were friends, before I think we all had smartphones with GPS too, and he would ask people for help, and he would be like, I don't, can you write it down? And then he would just, after a while, just like the person would be like, I'll explain it, you'll get it. And I would just watch the light and joy go out of his face and just go, I'm going to nod my head and indulge.
No.
And I know nothing. I will have retained none of this.
That is so sad.
Yeah.
Very sad. Yeah, I remember, you were making me remember a friend of mine, or you're reminding me of a friend who currently lives in Chicago. And when she lived here in Sarasota, like we would go somewhere near our theater, not too far, maybe 3 or 4 blocks. And now I feel cruel that I was doing this, but I would literally be like, so which way is the theater? And she like we're not too, we're maybe a third of a mile away. And then so then she'll look around and then she'll point in like the opposite direction. I'm like, no, it's so yes, the pain of like the directionally challenged, I feel bad.
Also, like some people with like scale, like
scale.
My husband was like, one time, like before he realized that you could have Google like, tell you how long it is to a next like midpoint while you're in a trip.
Yeah.
I was like, how far away does that next bathroom or like rest stop look? And he's like, He's like, it's probably about an hour. And then I'm like, an hour? Is that an hour? And then like we looked at it, it was like 5 minutes. Yeah. He's like, I was just judging that from this space to this space.
And here's the thing though, and maybe I have a feeling that maybe those folks who like have difficulty with scale or direction, my empathy with them is that I am temporally challenged. Like time is a thing that, even though like schedules and agendas, like that's really important to me.
Okay.
But like my sense of how much time has passed or how much time it's going to take me to get somewhere.
Keep an eye on time.
Oh, right.
For you, too.
Thank you. To go to my next thing. Yeah. My sense of time is horrendous, and I get constantly made fun of it because it's going to be like, I could be here at home and I got to go pick up my kids, and I'll be like, maybe you have to get picked up at 3 p.m. or something, and it's 2:50, and my wife will tell me like, you have to go pick up the kids. I'm like, oh, I know. And then she's like, it's going to take you 15 minutes. I'm like, oh, right. I like that the set
putting them together,
like how time works in my head. Like in my mind, I'm like, it's right over there. Therefore, it's going to take me 5 minutes. No, well, it's 15 minutes.
Has the the pandemic lifestyle made that any worse? Because I feel like time is becoming even odder during the pandemic. It's just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Time.
Yeah. I mean, the first couple of months were really strange. I mean, I started to sleep weird hours. I was waking up at weird times. Like, time just meant nothing. But now, what makes time even weirder is we are. I think like the virtual world, especially working in the virtual world, has really messed everything up because it's like there's no more travel time.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
which is a huge plus.
It's a huge plus, but you're like meetings one right after another.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to go anywhere. You just log out, log back in.
Yep.
And so time is becoming this vacuum where, I mean,
also 3 hours teaching a class in front of a computer feels completely different than 3 hours teaching a class in person.
Yes. Yeah.
Like though I may have had fun the whole time and been like felt alert, when I'm done teaching a 3-hour class online, I am like, it feels more like I used to teach like on Saturday, like sometimes like 9 hours. It was kind of crazy. But it feels more like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like teaching online.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go cry for a second. I'm so tired.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, thankfully, I feel like I'm getting. That's a totally different lawnmower.
Yeah, is that a weed whacker?
It might be a weed whacker.
You guys might not be hearing it. I know there's like church bells ringing in the last time I was recording, and I was like, "Do you hear that?" to the person on the other side of the Zoom, and they're like, "No, there's church bells."
I forgot that Tuesday. Today's Tuesday, right? Speaking of time, yes, today's Tuesday. Tuesday is the day that the city trims the park that we're right next to.
Okay, yeah.
So they close everything. I mean,
sure enough,
it's shut down. And yeah, they're definitely. We can confirm
it is Tuesday,
and they are trimming the park. and
it looks great. Yeah. There's no poops on the ground.
No poops. Everything's going well in this corner of Sarasota. But yes, yeah, I mean, thankfully, I'm starting to get more and more used to it. But I would say, like early in the virtual teaching, the naps were constant. Like I would like teach, then like, okay, I've got 20 minutes to my next class. Nap, teach 20. But now, thankfully, I think I've got it down.
You sound like very busy and like you've got a lot of stuff going on. Like,
yes,
I feel tired. Like I'm like, Tuesday I got a class. Let me prep for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes when you have less in life, the one extra thing feels like a big deal to you. You're like, oh boy. I have to be somewhere on Tuesday, so it is Sunday. I gotta start thinking about that.
So are you still teaching now?
Yeah, I'm teaching this past term I taught like 3 classes.
For
Second City.
For Second City, okay.
And occasionally I'll teach like an independent thing, but I haven't been doing that as much right now. And then we're just going into a new term. So,
okay.
If you can remember working for someone else,
yeah,
you don't know what's going to happen every 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be a great 8 weeks or not? You have no idea how much work you're going to get in that world.
Right.
Which you, like, was one thing I wanted to talk about with you is, like, you've done such a great job. It seems like in your career, have just been like such a go-getter of like finding all the avenues in which you want to apply your skill set and your improv, and like let's take a little look over your website of like all the unique work you do, like with Alzheimer's. I thought for a moment that you like did meditation work. Then I realized it was mediation. I got so excited. I was like, I want to talk about meditation. But like, it's kind of interesting of like how I always think as an actor, improviser, comedian, we always have to self-produce everything, and like there's so much like you learn so many skill sets. Like I had to learn how to edit and blah blah blah. Right. But like someone like you is like really like, how many theaters do you have your feet in as like directors and
so yes,
artistic director?
I am. So my full-time gig is here in Sarasota as the director of improvisation for the Florida Studio Theater. But I'm also the artistic director emeritus of Improv Boston, which was an honorary title for the most part, but I was activated into service a couple of years ago when there was
like born supremacy.
Yeah, like right, exactly. It was like the management team stepped away. So then I got a call from the board of directors. They were like, we need your help. And so I was for a year, I was helping them out. I was flying up to Boston every month. Then of course now working with and for Improv Asylum, right, as their incoming artistic director, kind of so that's another one. Then I have my own group, Big Bang Improv, and so which is my international touring presence. So those are the main four. Whew. But then
main four, just there's four that are main, and then there's more.
And then there's more. There's other like projects and groups that I
you do some personal training too.
I do personal training, yeah. So
yes.
and then again, all of this has sort of it's been organic. A lot of these tilts in my life have been organic, and where it's kind of me just saying yes to. And I think this is. Sorry for sidetracking really quick.
No.
As an I think one of the beautiful things about improv, one of the benefits of improv is it starts to rewire your way of thinking. After a while. You're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say yes to this opportunity, right? It looks like something that I can do, so I'm going to say yes to it, and then I'm going to see where it's going to go, kind of like in an improv scene. I'm going to say yes, and then we'll see what happens. And then that's how the mediation stuff started. Like that's I said yes to a gig. They needed entertainment during a conference. So there was a mediation conference, and they were like, we need an improv show. Yeah. And I pitched them a bunch of shows, and they were like, oh, this one-person improv show that you do sounds interesting. Could you do that one? And I was like, oh, boy, not the one that I thought you were going to pick, but okay, I'll do it. And it's a one-person improv show that I do. I did that, and then they invited me back the next year. And then after the second year, they're like, Will, we think that... the second year it was a show and a workshop. And then after that, the folks who run this mediation institute were like, "Hey, we like your workshop. We like what you do. Would you ever consider being a mediator?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Not something that I thought about." And they were like, "We will sponsor your education to become a mediator."
That's very cool.
And so then that's what opened that whole door. And so now I do. Not only do I do mediation, but I train mediators. Right. So that's that. And then the whole physical trainer thing was very similar. It's like I'd been doing CrossFit for about 5 years. And then an opportunity came up to take the class and getting a certificate in it. And I was like, okay, sure, let me do this. I took it. And then it started to really tap into my teaching soul. And I was like, oh, I get it. Now that I get this more, I want to start to teach it.
You're just a teacher at heart, probably.
Right,
too,
yeah.
Right?
And so then I'm like, let's just take that next step.
Once you know something, you feel like you want to share it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm the same sort of way.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
I used to teach rock climbing for like years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that I've done that I'm like, oh, would I want to teach this? And then I'm like, stop, you don't have to teach it. Right. You don't have to teach it.
That's good. I gotta stop myself.
And there's definitely a type, right, where it's like, you probably appreciate someone who communicates clearly and teaches things well.
Yeah.
And, has a good way of getting you to understand something.
Yeah.
And then once you learn something, it's like you just almost want to share it because I learned this thing and I think I can explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's a satisfying thing to be able to share something that you've learned.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like one thing because I'm big into sports, and I've always noted I've always paid attention to like the really good coaches and what they do. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the best coaches weren't always like the all-star players. Like they're not the ones that like kind of were the best players, but they're the ones who were really good players, but they sort of had to teach themselves how to get to that.
Because it wasn't potentially like just like innate to them, and so they had to do the mental math.
Exactly.
Like, this is based on my ability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's helped me understanding that, right? Understanding how head coaches do that started to affect the way that I teach as well. And instead of me being like, oh, you see why can't you just do that? What I do the thing that I just did. No, it's like I need to build people up so that they understand it and they could do it for themselves.
Yeah. I've only occasionally, I shouldn't say super occasionally, but on the occasion I get to co-teach with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And like every time I appreciate doing that so much.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like, 95% of the time I'm like, damn, this person, like, I love some of the stuff they're doing. Like, every once in a while you're like, oh, I want to do it that way. I want to do it that way. Just because like you probably have a strong point of view as a teacher, right?
Yeah.
But it's just so like satisfying to watch other people like be like, oh my God, I wouldn't run class this way, but that's cool. Or yeah, it's very fun to watch people's style come out and like how they approach things.
Yeah.
And I do feel that the majority of people I've watched, teach, and the people I've taken classes from, I'm like very impressed with of like their passion and how they communicate it and like what their approach is. So
you're making me think of something. Because you said you study German and philosophy?
Yeah.
Did that, because my answer to the question I'm about to ask you is yes, definitely, for me. Uh-huh. But for you, did what you studied inspire the way that you teach?
Ooh, that's a good one, Will. Did what I study inspire the way that I teach? I think, well, it's so funny because like philosophy is such a broad, open topic that I think like I probably had a philosophical slant to me my whole life.
Okay.
And I just happened to then get an opportunity to study it. And so I would say, yeah, in a broad sense, my like philosophy does inspire the way I teach, but it I guess I would think of it more of just a predisposition that I have already, from the get-go.
Sure.
Does German? No, probably not too much, except for when I play a German character.
Right. Have you been to? Have you visited like German theaters, festivals?
I have. Oh boy, did I? No, like Belgian and no, I have not done any. I think I saw like one German show. Uh-huh. Yeah, in a small southern Bavarian town.
Oh wow, cool. Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be, once the world opens up again, there's some really neat festivals out there.
I've really most of my improv career, this is kind of an interesting thing, I have been kind of stifled in Chicago.
Okay.
I think, as a lot of improvisers may know, like I just never felt like I had the money to like go travel and do these festivals. Yeah. And in the past few years, starting to travel more and like having some more like money to do that sort of stuff, of like such a shift of like you can get real like, oh yeah, Chicago's where it's at, right? And then you're like, there's like these cool things happening everywhere, and there's like these amazing teachers sitting in these like cities that aren't New York, LA, or Chicago.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
And it definitely opens up a lot for you as a performer and an improviser. Yeah. But does what you studied inform the way you teach?
So I was a physics and a computer science major in college, and I would say it influenced the way that I saw improv. Definitely. I always cite this one class that I took, and it was like my junior, senior year. It was a class on the mechanics of like the working universe, like from like the quantum level up to like the astronomic level, right? Like kind of just looking at everything. And this is why it jumped out at me, because there was part of the class where we had to focus on the physics on a planetary level and on a quantum level, and note that they function differently, but also like how are they the same was the big thing. And then I just remember at that point in my brain being like, oh wow, like and I was still very new, so it was like 97, 90, no, not even that, 96, 95, 96. So I was just starting to get the idea of like short form and long form. And it was, and this was pre-internet, or it was not pre-internet, but pre-browsers and Googles and all that. So it was, I was being fed in this information by people who had seen the promised land of improv, and they would talk to me about short form and long form. And then I'd be like, oh wow, so there's these two things of improv, which up until this point I've been taught as two different things. But then like at the same time, this physics thing entered my head. And then at that point I'm like, wait, what if there's a similarity between this short stuff,
the quantum level, and what's the regular Newtonian level?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and that like really, it like programmed my improv brain to always be looking for those connections and threads across all these different things. And so that inspired the way that I teach as well, because I'm always like trying to be like, here's how this connects to this. Here's how this little short form move relates to this long form move.
I love that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm sure that studying German, and I'm sure that studying philosophy it definitely informed, the way I teach. But I would bet that not as specific to studying German itself, but like learning a new language.
Yeah.
You're at least bilingual, right?
Yes.
I heard you speaking Spanish. And then is it bilingual or
bilingual? Yes.
Yeah. As I learned a language, especially as an adult, you learn the skill set of being a sympathetic speaker and listener. Because after learning a language that like you need people to speak in a certain way to you who have mastery of that language. So they need to be a sympathetic speaker.
Yep.
So you can understand them.
Sympathetic speaker. I love that.
Yep. And then also like as someone, like if I'm speaking to someone who doesn't have mastery of English, then I need to also be like a sympathetic listener because you're using like, I don't know, it just trains you to listen and speak in a way to know that you're being comprehended and that you're presenting in a way that can be comprehended. So man, boy, did I have to hone that skill for like 4 years, studying German in college.
I am caught up in that term because I love it. Or both of those in conjunction with one another. The idea of a sympathetic speaker. Is that what you said? It's sympathetic.
A sympathetic
and a sympathetic listener. I love that. Yeah.
Because like even like the words you choose in a new language, you're like, man, I know that this person who's just starting their way in this language, the likelihood that they're going to know this word. Yeah. Let me get a more simple word, like snag, or let me be more expressive and let me watch them to make sure that they're comprehending. Of course that applies in improv. I mean,
it totally does.
Just a direct correlation almost.
So you're like, okay, this whole thing, love it. I love it. And now I'm like, I gotta steal this from Jonny because I think it's great. But it's tying over to how CrossFit has influenced me as an improv teacher.
Oh, interesting.
So there's two definite ways, and then one that I'm considering.
Also, you're a CrossFitter.
Yes,
you didn't tell me that earlier.
Yes.
That's a specific
type of fitness
and cult.
Yeah. In that way, it's very much like improv. The cultish aspect is very much like
There's
improv.
There's levels.
So we another part of it is that, like improv, you could go to like any improv theater in the world, and it's like, hey,
Oh,
CrossFit's
cool.
the same way. You go to any CrossFit gym anywhere in the world, you're suddenly like within your cult. And like the language, the primary language might be different, but the internal language is the same. Like we're still saying the same things. So one thing that one way that improv or that CrossFit inspired my teaching is the way just a CrossFit class runs, right? There's like you do your stretching and mobility at the top.
Okay.
Then you do very like muscle specific warm-ups. Then you go into the main workout. And then once I did that, I started to rearrange my classes to kind of be in the same way. I started to move warm-ups out of certain weeks that I'm like, this warm-up does nothing to build the skill that we're doing right now. So I've started to rearrange my warm-ups to kind of think along the same lines. Another thing that CrossFit does is that, and I think there's one thing that not many people know, is that it's meant so that anyone of any strength and skill level could all be in the same class together.
Okay.
Right? So like you could be, they might, what we call the RX of the website, the RX of the workout. It might be like, okay, for this, the RX, you've got to lift, like it was yesterday, you had to lift 145 pounds, right? And then do these other very complicated moves. If you could do that, awesome. If you cannot, then we're going to bring the weight down a little bit. We're going to be like 95 pounds or 65 pounds. If even that's too difficult, like if you have mobility issues, then what we're going to do is we're going to, like, no weights. We're just going to bring a PVC pipe out and some bands. So you could still do the workout with everybody else, but to meet your skill level.
That's great.
Right? And so it started to really influence me, especially once I moved to Sarasota, where I'm dealing with a very different demographic. I'm dealing with an older demographic mixed in with a young demographic.
In your classes?
In my classes.
And now is this in your improv classes?
In my improv classes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have my improv classes can go from like, I have one improv class that ranges from 23, 24 to 67. Right?
Yeah,
and
that's a big span.
And it's very common in my classes. So I start to figure out what CrossFit helped me was like this idea of scaling an improv class so that somebody who might be a little bit faster, a little bit who's with more experience can work with somebody who maybe has not had I'm going to start to mix things, who does not have the same cognitive fitness that a younger person has. So they might need to might need to scale an exercise for them so that they could still participate together. And so this goes to I tie it back to this whole idea of sympathetic speaking and listening.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Dude, this has been such a treat. A dang delight. I'm keeping track of the time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this, Will.
Yeah,
such a pleasure.
This was great.
Also, just to speak to like Will's like yes and like I just emailed him. Never met him before, and like immediately the next day he's like yeah, and I'm like I might be leaving town tomorrow. Could you do tomorrow? Tomorrow. He's like yeah, in the morning for sure. Yeah. And then I'm like my car battery's dead. He's like okay, I can come to you. And like, so thank you for being so just like down to jump in, and it's been really cool getting to meet you.
Oh, I'm glad we were able to make it work. I mean, this is a special treat, and and just being here, I'm still like keep looking at the van and looking at all these awesome things. Great work here.
Thank you so much.
I know our paths will cross again.
Yes, for sure.
And so thank you so much, Jonny.
Thank you.
Right. Come on, dance appetite, dance to the middle of the night. Come on, dance, wake up the appetite, dance to the middle of the night. Come on, dance, wake up the appetite, dance to the middle of the night. Come on, dance, wake up the appetite, dance to the middle of the night. Yeah.